Now that we're into the thick of the general election season, the nominees for statewide office in both parties are starting to bring in the big guns to draw crowds and attention to help their respective causes. And that means we get some very interesting guests here on Close Up, such as former ambassador to the United Nations and two-time governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, who joins us in studio. Thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
We appreciate the time. So you're here to campaign for Republicans. You've won a few elections in your day yourself. What is the winning message for the GOP in November?
You know, it's actually probably easier than it's ever been. You know, we were helping Chris Sununu yesterday, who's done a great job with the state of New Hampshire, and we're going to be working with General Bolduc. And you look at the fact that Maggie Hassan, I mean, she's raised taxes. She's agreed with hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. She hasn't done anything to stop or secure the border. She hasn't done anything to help parents when it comes to their education. And then you've got General Bolduc. And here's a true American hero. He's already sacrificed for us. He's already served the country. But he's not going to raise your taxes. The first thing he's going to do is make sure we fire those 87,000 IRS agents and put them on the border. We're going to make sure that we allow parents to see what's being taught in schools, and he understands the value of a dollar. He'll never vote to raise the taxes of the people of New Hampshire. And that's the difference, is when you look at what the Democrats have done, there's never been a spending bill they didn't want to go and put in place. They don't understand the rights of parents. They don't understand the devastation of crime and fentanyl that's happening in this country, and they refuse to secure the border. And so when you look at people like General Bolduc, it's a no-brainer. And the idea that you'd have a true American hero representing the live free or die state is pretty cool.
When it comes to inflation, a lot of Republicans say one of the answers is to cut government spending. Is there really a guarantee, though, if you bring about more austerity in Washington, that you'll see prices go down?
Well, think about just what Biden and your senator did in terms of the energy. They closed down the energy sector. They've tapped into the oil reserves, giving a false impression that gas prices are going down. Miraculously, that's all going to end after Election Day. And everybody in New Hampshire is going to watch their gas prices, their utility prices go straight up, because all they've done is try and buy votes. You know, whether it's taking from people who didn't go to college and making them pay for those who did, whether it's going and shutting down the energy sector and saying, oh, gas prices are coming down when they're really not. These are all false flags that they're giving to the American people, and it's wrong. And what you're going to have is people like General Bolduc that said, wait a minute, you know, we're not going to go raise taxes when you're dealing with a recession. We're not going to turn around and, you know, cut off oil reserves when utility prices, 1 in 6 Americans can't pay their utility bill. You look at the fact that 30% of Americans have dipped into their savings account, 60% are in credit card debt. That's not the time you raise taxes and spend. Not when we have $30 trillion in debt. That's when you say, hey, maybe we need to run America like we run our households and our small businesses, where you appreciate the value of a tax dollar and you do whatever it takes to protect it.
Inflation is a big issue. We know for a lot of people, abortion is also a big issue heading into this November election. So I'm curious for your perspective on the bill that's been proposed by your fellow South Carolinian and your Senator Lindsey Graham, the 15-week federal abortion ban. Would you support that?
Well, I think, first of all, you know, I'm very pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted and we had trouble having both of our children. Having said that, I never thought unelected justices should be deciding something this personal. This is personal for every American. So I want to see, as many states that are pro-life as possible, but what we want are people who serve the American people, elected officials. You saw in Kansas, as much as I'd love for Kansas to be pro-life, the people decided. They decided the fact that where they wanted it, what weeks they wanted, you know, abortion to be able to exist, whether they had exceptions or not. That's where I want it to be. What I don't want America to do is to judge each other, because this is a very personal issue. And so what we saw the Democrats do in D.C. was basically say they were okay with abortion up until the time of birth. The senator here in New Hampshire was perfectly fine with that. We want to save as many lives as we can, but we want to do it by allowing the people of America to decide, not unelected bureaucrats or justices.
Given how personal it is, do you think Republicans need to think more or change how they talk about the issue. You have an instance here in New Hampshire where, General Bolduc told Senator Hassan, quote, "get over it," regarding the Dobbs decision. Does that risk alienating some women who might otherwise be willing to support Republicans?
Well, I think we need to be respectful about it. I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to judge someone that's pro-choice any more than I want someone pro-choice to judge me for being pro-life. We need to have a respectful conversation about it. We need to understand that everybody cares for different reasons, whether it's their experiences, whether it's their religious beliefs, whatever it is. But what we do need to do is lean into this. Lean into the fact that this is a very important issue in America. This is an issue that affects every single individual in their family. So let's get it right. And the way you get it right is by having great debate, great conversations about how we protect mothers, about how we protect children, about what we do to support parents who want to adopt, about what we do to make sure that no one falls through the system, so that from the time that a baby is conceived all the way to the time that they go to school and get a job, that they live a better life than what we lived before it.
Speaking of personal, you came under some unexpected fire on The View this last week. What was your reaction when what was said about you here, you were called a, quote, chameleon for using your middle name instead of your first name?
It's not the first time that the women on The View have attacked me. It won't be the last time. I brush it off my shoulder. It's amazing to me how liberal Democrats, they can't stand that a minority female would be a conservative Republican. They just can't take it. And this goes back to when I was elected governor the first time. I was elected the first minority governor in the country. And a prominent African-American female Democrat in South Carolina, when asked by a reporter, well, how do you feel about the fact that you've elected, the first minority female governor? And she said, Nikki Haley's not a minority. She's just a conservative with a tan. Liberals have done this all the time. They only like you if you're with them. They don't like you or celebrate you if you're not with them. And so, look, it said more about them than it said about me and their complaints. It was incredibly racist to go and judge my name. My name is Nikki. It's on my birth certificate. The reason I'm Haley is because I married my husband. And it's interesting that, Sunny Hassan from The View and Whoopi Goldberg, that's not their names. It's not on their birth certificate. But the hypocrisy still runs deep.
Let's talk some foreign policy. Is it worthwhile to kick Russia out of the UN, or would that just be a gesture?
Well, first of all, it's not going to happen. Russia's got a veto, right? But there's something very telling about the fact that here you've had a country invade a free democratic country and is not in any way punished by this world body. At least they should be doing is coming together and sanctioning Russia, condemning Russia, doing something. But because Russia's one of the 5 countries that have a veto at the UN, you're not seeing anything happen. And that goes, again, why the United Nations continues to be a weak body, is because until they start doing things that are uncomfortable to do, until they start doing things that are strong, that truly bring peace in the world, you're not going to see any relevance there.
The withdrawal from Afghanistan was a debacle. But does the Biden administration deserve credit for how it has handled the war in Ukraine?
So first of all, we would not have a war with Russia and Ukraine had it not been the debacle in Afghanistan. I am the wife of a combat veteran. He served and deployed in Afghanistan. The idea that America would leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our allies. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. And so now you look at this Russian-Ukrainian issue. If Biden had handled it sooner, if he had handled Afghanistan stronger, we wouldn't even be dealing with this. But now, this is a war we need to win, because this isn't about Russia and Ukraine. This is about a war on freedom. Doesn't mean we need to give a blank check to Ukraine. What it does mean is give them the equipment to win. If they need anti-drone equipment, give it to them. It's very telling how far Putin has fallen. When he has to rely on Iran for drones, when he has to rely on North Korea for rockets, he's in a bad place. He's lost the confidence of his people. He's lost the confidence of his military. Russia has increased the draft age to 65. Which is unbelievable. And so he's pretty much hit rock bottom, and he knows that. We need to make sure that we are with all of our NATO countries and the Europeans and saying, okay, what are you doing for Ukraine? What are you doing for Ukraine? And give them what they need to fight. The miraculous thing about the Ukrainians, the inspiring thing about the Ukrainians, is here these men left their wives and their children to go fight for their country. The women are there making Molotov cocktails. Think about that. That used to be us. We used to fight for America like that. We used to love our country like that. We used to be willing to do anything to protect our freedoms. But all of a sudden, our country has been taken over by this national self-loathing. The idea that we're an oppressed country, that we're a racist country, that we're a bad country. We still are the best country in the world. When we lead, the world follows. When we speak, the world listens. Who we are, the world wants to be. We've got to get that spirit back again. When we get that spirit back again, when we get rid of all of these distractions that are happening in the country, the world will be at peace.
Two more quick questions for you here. What do you make of former President Trump's assertion that he can declassify documents with his mind just by thinking it?
I mean, look, the whole thing was bizarre. The idea that they went into Mar-a-Lago the way they did, they have to justify to the American people why you would do that. You know, the details are still coming out. There is a process to handle classified information. We all know that from whether you were in the United Nations or the State Department. And so, you know, there's a lot of unanswered questions. And so I think we just need to find out exactly what happened, what type of information this was, and whether we can trust the system. I think that's the biggest problem for the American people. Is we just don't know what the whole situation is with this story.
And you said previously you would consider running for president if you think there is a place for you. We've been a few months on from that statement. Do you see that place opening up in the next few months?
Well, we have been all over the country helping House members, Senate candidates, 36 governors' races. If we don't win in November, there is no 24. So 100% is going towards making sure we do that. We've got some fantastic candidates like you've got with Chris Sununu and General Bolduc here in New Hampshire. We've been in Pennsylvania. We've been in Georgia. We're going to Nevada next week. We've been in Texas. So we're going to continue to do that. And then after November, you know, we'll look at the scenario. And, you know, I've always said, if there's a place for me, I've never lost a race. I'll put 1,000% into it and we'll finish it. If there's not a place for me, I have fought for this country as long as I can remember, and I'll do it until my last breath.
Ambassador Haley, thank you for joining us on Close Up.
It's been a pleasure.
We appreciate the time.